Well, thank you so much. We have Darren Gill here, the super agent, right, on Twitter, CFL sports agent. Thank you so much for coming on today. How is everything going for you now? Like, we're getting into the season. It's been a lot of uncertainty. We're less than like 2 weeks away now. How are things going in your world?
Good. Obviously, it's been an interesting ride over the last year and a half, and happy that the league is back and under obviously odd or different circumstances. So there's been an adjustment for my clients, myself, teams. Like, I guess everyone's still learning through it, learning live, which is interesting. But it's been great. I'm just happy to see football back, and certainly my clients are happy to be back on the field.
How challenging was that for you to kind of have to negotiate? Because, it's like the league is dealing with, COVID things and scheduling things and money things and XFL things and all this. And then we have the players, and they got to work, right? They're trying to get money. They're trying to, do what they want to do. How is it for you kind of being in the middle there and balancing all that?
There was certainly a challenge when, the league was allowed to re-sign players or to sign players. There was still a tremendous amount of uncertainty. So, here we are talking about an upcoming season that we had no idea whether A, would happen, or B, what would it look like. So as players are going through the process, it was difficult because obviously most of my clients are, a little bit older, and, they have families, and there's other considerations. Plus, a lot of them moved on to some pretty good jobs. So now you've got another factor that you need to consider, which is, I've started a new career. Do I want to step away from it? What am I stepping away for? So there was a lot of questions. Regrettably, there was a lot of answers that nobody really had. Right. So going back to December when, things started to open up, you're like, well, I don't really know what the future might look like, but let's plan for good, right? Let's assume that the world gets better, and let's assume that we're back on the field for hopefully at least 14 games, which I think was initially kind of the view anyways. So, here we are in a situation where things, kind of got cleared up, but even heading into camp, obviously with the number of retirements we saw, there was still a lot of uncertainty about, what will the season actually feel like? What will the restrictions be in my home city? Will I be able to see my family? Will I be able to see friends? Will I, have a normal life? So I would say that it's been a unique challenge. It's been a challenge that I certainly enjoyed because I enjoy working with my clients and working through some of these special circumstances, but certainly it's uncharted waters.
I have to feel like, and not to equate a little bit, as a wedding videographer, we deal with a lot of, your business stuff, right? We're there, we deal with it. And I do feel like in the last 2 years, year and a half now, very much tied to our clients, right? And what is happening and the restrictions and what's going on. I mean, do you feel that bond and obviously the work that you're doing and just those relationships kind of having to weave and figure all this stuff out has really strengthened with the guys that you're representing?
It certainly has. I mean, I try to have a pretty good relationship with my clients as well. Finding the right clients, finding that client fit has always been extremely important to me. But obviously, this makes the conversations different. I know most of my clients, spouses' names. I know most of their kids' names. So, I feel for their situation. I understand. I know a lot of their parents, some of the younger players. So, knowing the situations and knowing these clients on a whole other level puts that added layer of care into it. And certainly allowed me to not necessarily be in their shoes, because it's hard to do that, but understand their position a lot more. So, regrettably, when Brad Sinopoli called me to tell me he was going to walk away from the game, first off, whatever my client does is something I'm going to support. And secondly, I understand it a lot more. And some other clients obviously who have walked away, Alex Mateas, similarly, again, very, different situation from Brad's, but one that I understood. And it's compassion is rare in this business, but it's important. So although, losing a client who's obviously no longer playing is not fun, seeing somebody step away for the right reasons and seeing somebody who's actually going to start their next career is even more exciting. I always like to be there from draft day to hopefully Hall of Fame enshrinement. And for me, it's been quite interesting that obviously, this period caused some uncomfortable conversations, some unexpected conversations, some premature retirements. But it certainly, like to your point, has caused us to kind of get a little bit closer and also talk more about life than just, football or X's and O's.
Yeah, and I want to get into Brad and all that as well. But when we're dealing with these retirements, a lot was made of like Coach Dickinson's comments. Players are going to come up. There's going to be cuts. People aren't going to be in shape, and a lot of people said, well, the fact is a lot of these guys are working. Could be any number of jobs, right? That isn't preparing to play for football, right? And so then I was just on with Rob Vanstone, and we were talking about injuries and going from kind of 0 to 60, right? And getting onto that. How difficult were those conversations that you had with your clients about balancing with the jobs, getting back to it? Is it worth it? Obviously, these protocols are pretty strict, right? That the CFL is rolling out, at least at the beginning of the season, right? Hopefully we're going to, maybe differentiate, with vaccinated and not, but going on. How challenging and difficult were those conversations?
I wouldn't say any of them were difficult, but they were interesting. And I think that the bigger issue for me was players falling out of love with the game. And when you fall in love, when you fall in love with something, you want to get up at 6 a.m., right? If you're a beer league hockey player, you're going to play at all hours of the day. If you're a passionate anything, you're going to do things that maybe you wouldn't do in normal circumstances. Like in this case, what you saw were some players who actually chose not to get up for that 6 a.m. workout, who chose not to put in that extra time because they no longer felt that passion for the game. And I think that was the bigger issue. Now, obviously, there's a host of other players who are up at 6 a.m., who are working hard, were working out because they fully intended on playing, and that was where their passion was. So it was pretty easy to see during the pandemic, which of those players might be at risk for not playing in the future, just given the fact that they found something else to fall in love with. They figured that it was time to move on, and in their mind, forgetting about their body, right? It was the mind that was wanting to leave the game more than the body was. And I think that was the bigger issue for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. Do you worry about the CFL fan, as we're approaching the season? Have some of them fallen out of love with the game? Do you, I mean, obviously it's part of the business that you're in, and, we're trying to get through the season, whatever. Do you worry about that at all?
I worry about it in some cases. Obviously the Canadian Football League puts on a phenomenal show. It's an entertainment spectacle into itself, and going to a game is amazing. Nothing short of it. So what will that look like? Right? What will that experience look like in stadium? Will the fans, want to go down to Molson Stadium here in Montreal on a Friday night or a Saturday night or a Sunday afternoon to watch a game that's not quite the same as it used to be? So knowing that this is obviously a revenue generated league through gate, how do you ensure that people go to the stadium? Now, obviously, if you're in Saskatchewan, it's a whole different situation, right? It's like being a Montreal Canadiens fan in hockey, or Green Bay Packers fan in football. They're going to fill the stands because people they love the team. In a lot of other cities, I think they're looking for that entertainment. They're looking for the excitement. So I'm not as much worried about the product on the field, which obviously this year might not be as good as it has been in years past because some stars walked away, and also, unfortunately, people have been off for a while. So I expect it to be an odd start. But I'm also concerned that the in-stadium experience isn't what it used to be, just because of some of these restrictions, and that potentially will keep people away from the stands early on.
When the Brad Sinopoli news came out, it seemed shockwaves. How shocking was that for you to get that call?
I maintained pretty close contact with the majority of my clients throughout the pandemic, so I think it was becoming a little bit easier to read the tea leaves in terms of what players would be doing post-pandemic. So, you're always going to be surprised in that situation. But truthfully, I think the writing was on the wall for a little while. Brad's, made the choice to walk away on his own, and it seemed like, I'm not saying it was a long time coming, but I knew that Brad had so many other things off the field, and certainly had some things he wanted to accomplish in life that weren't going to be on the football field. And I wouldn't say I was necessarily surprised. Not that it's something that we knew a long time ago, but it's one of those things that when it happens, you're kind of like, I saw some of the signs were there that maybe another client of mine, it would have been more surprised. But in his case, I completely understood it.
Because for us, much is made about, some of the pay that some of the players get, right? And especially this season with all the reduced games and everything. And, but it seemed like he was walking away from, pretty good contract, had he had continued to play, right? Pretty good money on the table to continue playing.
Absolutely. Several players obviously walked away from some pretty nice contracts or who decided not to play. So Brad being one of them, Alex Mateas being another. So, which tells you obviously it wasn't about the money. It wasn't, wasn't the fact that they were going to make a little less money because it was a shortened season. It wasn't because, they didn't value being football players or what they were being paid. These are players that decided to put other aspects of their life ahead of the game, and obviously you can't fault anybody for it. And there were players who walked away from NFL contracts, right? There were players that sat out of the NFL who were obviously making substantially more money. So when it comes down to the players' health, their safety, or just their passion, money's nice, but it's certainly not going to be the driver for why they were going to stick around.
When you're working through and trying to figure out what is the season going to look like, keeping in touch with the players, is there enough, and I know that this year there were so many unknowns, but was there enough transparency with the league, like what's going on? Are we ready? I mean, I remember we still didn't have, we were getting ready for the governor's vote. Winnipeg is still signing players. It's like, okay, well, do we know things, do we not know things, what's going on here? I mean, is that challenging to be in that position for you?
I think that the information came as quickly as it could. And regrettably, obviously, everyone would have liked to have known sooner. There was obviously players who wanted to figure out what was next, I had several players who had some pretty lucrative job offers on the table that needed to make decisions. But I do believe that the league did as good as the jobs as they could with the information they had in front of them. The CFLPA has been absolutely phenomenal in communicating with membership and has done a really good job behind the scenes of keeping everyone up to date, agents included. So regrettably, everyone wanted the communication to be better and quicker, but I don't believe that was necessarily a possibility given the challenges and given the hurdles that the league had to go through, which, one was certainly the fact that they needed to figure out their own situation amongst their own owners. And then secondly, needed to figure out what was going to be possible in each cities that they play. So, I'm guessing that everyone's still going to be upset with how slowly it seemingly went. But I do believe that the league did a pretty good job.
How disappointing was last year and not being able to play and feeling like that it was kind of like the air was let out of the balloon, right? We didn't know. This year it did seem like like we said, they took their time trying to figure that. I mean, how disappointing was that for you and the guys that you represent last year?
Yeah, it was tough. In hindsight, obviously, it was likely the right decision. Given where things ended up and what the world looked like last year. Unfortunately, again, I think last year the communication was a little bit different. It wasn't as good as it was this year. So I think the league learned that they needed to communicate better, specifically with the players. Communicating amongst the league owners and the board of governors is one thing, but last year the players weren't being, were not part of that process. Where I think this year that changed. So I think the most disappointing thing, going back to last season, was the lack of communication. But unfortunately, again, I think the league made the right decision, and it was a tough decision to make. But this league did not have the funds to go into a bubble like some of the other leagues did.
I don't want to, you don't have to say anything off color or whatever, but looking this year, there's been some players unhappy with some of the, they got to be housebound, some of the protocols and everything, wanting there to be differentiations, like the NFL is doing. Are you having conversations with those players? Do you have thoughts on that at all?
It's a sensitive topic. And obviously, my objective is not to influence anybody's decision whether they want to be vaccinated or not. And would I be in favor of having different rules for vaccinated and unvaccinated? Absolutely. Vaccinations were supposed to be the key to freedom. And seemingly at this point, the players who have followed the protocols and who have listened, who have been vaccinated, are not receiving any benefits for it. So I, mildly surprised, because most other leagues obviously are creating a 2-tiered system. But I also understand that it's much harder to enforce. It's much harder to control. And again, the league that doesn't have the resources that other leagues have are going to have a difficult time trying to figure out how to actually create this 2-tiered system. So regrettably, the answer is you're going to play to what is now the lowest common denominator, which is the unvaccinated person, and design all the rules around it to try and be as safe as possible. So I do also understand that the league's focus is player safety, both on and off the field. And this is the way they feel the player safety is maximized and that the least risk is taken. And unfortunately, it obviously is upsetting some players. But again, the players who didn't want to play in that scenario didn't have to. They could have chosen to obviously step away from the game. But those that are there obviously have kind of signed up for what's being put in front of them.
Yeah, because I get both sides, and you know the CFL has to get through the season. I mean, there's no like you can't have the rug pulled out, and like I said, your interview will follow Rob's here and talking about how there is no wiggle room right in the season. It just came out here today that if some of the NFL games can't be played this year because of the 18-week season, they'll just be forfeits, right? Because last year they really didn't know all that stuff. So I get both sides, but it is challenging because it's like the CFL has to play, right? There's no option for them not to, there has to be a Grey Cup on December 14th.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's what, the Board of Governors, the league owners signed up for a season. And I think at that point, and everyone I think understands the fact that these owners are potentially giving up a lot, which is, a lot of them are going to be, dipping into their pockets to keep these teams afloat for a season. There's no doubt about that, right? You're talking about several $1 million at best in some of these cases for these owners. So I think on the flip side, the owners are going, well, in order to make sure I protect some of my investment here, I'm asking something of you. And what I'm asking of you is to follow these strict protocols so that we're both committed. I'm committing my pockets and you're committing your time and unfortunately a bit of your solitude. So I get it. And, to your point, the league needed to happen this year. I wouldn't even want to think about what this league would look like after missing 2 seasons. And unfortunately, to your point as well, these aren't the ideal scenario. This is not the ideal circumstance, but it's probably the right thing to happen.
Looking forward here, right? We're getting ready for kickoff. Obviously, a lot of your players making waves, training camp, doing things in a good way. How are you feeling seeing the guys? Here, obviously, reading the training camp reports, all these kinds of things. Looking forward, who is kind of excelling in your mind, and who are we looking forward to seeing play this year?
I think all my clients are excelling. So it's that's like asking like a proud father which of his kids he loves most. So by no stretch of the imagination am I going to start naming names there because I think I represent the cream of the crop. But I think everyone's excited for the season. The challenge now is not having a baseline. I think every team feels like they're in a great position. Every team feels like they can go out and beat anybody. But absent of actually being able to play anybody, you have really no read on how teams are doing. So I think in their own little bubbles, every team is feeling good. Obviously, there have been some injury issues, which are unfortunate. I think we're all excited just to see the season start and really get those first few weeks out of the way because just like it normally is, it's usually pretty ugly. So I want to get into week 5, week 6, and see really what's out there because right now I think there's a lot of uncertainty around kind of the quality of play with the players being off, no preseason. Obviously, there were some games that were trying to be scheduled between teams that obviously were not allowed to be played. So I'm excited to see where the season goes. I think I want my clients to stay healthy first and foremost, and really I'm excited to see real CFL football and get people back on the field.
Yeah, it's hard, and we even just in the last week, I think like Edmonton, okay, we're taking a break day this day, or we're doing this, or we're doing that. It just doesn't seem like it is going to be. We're doing some inner squad, right? I think the Rough Riders is doing they're charging. Some fans are going to come, but it does get to the point where at some point it's we're pads on and we're hitting, and it'll be those first couple weeks. I think are going to be interesting to see how that all works out.
Yeah, and it usually is, right? I mean, whether it be the CFL or NFL. First few weeks, although obviously you have a preseason, at that point it's, you're trying to evaluate your talent. You're not putting your entire playbook in place. So, let's see what that looks like. And to your point, it's been difficult to actually have kind of these full, really, 100% effort practices because teams are obviously a little freaked out over what happened, with some injuries early on, not wanting to push your guys too hard. And that's the right thing to do. Just like, anybody right now is getting back into any sport that they were playing before the pandemic, no matter what age you are or what skill level you are, you've got to work yourself back in slowly. And I think that's one thing that teams are keenly aware of. And they want to make sure that obviously players are given their time. They're taking some extra, veteran days, as we call it, off if they need, and they're watching their bodies. So, not only are you trying to actually build a football team, put an offense in, put a defense in, determine who's your starters, but you're now also trying to make sure that the players of high value are probably actually getting a little less playtime. Or what you're also doing, in some cases, you're actually not letting anybody on the field much more than your starters. So, a big concern for me, some of the players who are battling for backup spots, they're not getting many reps in practice because you just don't have those reps to give. So what's going to happen when one of those veterans gets hurt, which inevitably is going to happen? Like that's not a pandemic issue. That's just the nature of the game, and how ready are those backups going to be? So I think that's kind of this little sprint we're going through versus your usual marathon is going to cause for some interesting repercussions later on in the season when maybe that rookie needs to step in and he's going, I didn't get a single rep in training camp and now I'm starting, right? Or, I didn't get a rep until the last week or until our inter-squad scrimmage, and now all of a sudden I'm stepping up into a bigger role. So it presents a whole boatload of challenges. The good news is that everyone's in the same boat. Everyone's got the same challenges, and that's why I think those first few weeks are going to be interesting.
Yeah, tremendous insights. Really, really interesting because it is so much to balance. I mean, I couldn't imagine trying to be one of these coaches or players and try to figure out, like you said, the restrictions and the playbooks and the players coming back and injuries, and we're getting ready to go and we don't know. So it's a lot to balance. Any other thoughts leading into the season before we let you go? I mean, I thought this was tremendous, and I really appreciate your insights.
No, I appreciate it. It's been a phenomenal conversation. Obviously, I love your passion as you become a fan of the Canadian Football League and then jump into it. So you're producing some phenomenal content. I think this is, I guess the fans are going to have to be understanding, right? Be understanding of the first few weeks, be understanding of the players who chose to walk away from the game, be understanding of the players who are choosing to play and maybe right now are not playing at their highest level. So just like everyone is trying to readjust and adapt, I think the same is going to go for this league. Also be understanding for your coaches and your GMs who might not have had the time to evaluate players, might not have had the time to, introduce new systems and playbooks. So it's going to be unique. This season, I'm sure, will be unique in itself. But I think the fan base just needs to be a little bit patient. But more importantly, I think it's going to be fun. Like when we get back to playing football here, people are going to be excited. Obviously, I think we're all really, really excited to see, a game that we just have fallen in love with back on the field again. Otherwise, again, it's let's get that football snapped, and hopefully we're all watching Grey Cup together in person.
Yeah, it's going to be. This is the much anticipated season. I can't imagine the CFL season as anticipated as this one kicking off soon. So it should be good. Darren, thank you so much again for your time. I'm sure busy doing a bunch of million things. So I really appreciate you taking some time to come on.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.